Right on.
Hey guys, hope you're all doing well. So, I've heard a bunch about The Boys TV show recently. Like, I never really watched it myself, I never really got into it. But some of the changes that I've read about in the show really seem to be, deliberately insulting the right. So, first of all, Homelander's like this evil, narcissistic, rapist douche, parading around as literally a metaphor for America. Like, the symbolism and metaphor there is that America, and by extension, America's nationalist right wing, is like corrupt, narcissistic, evil, only cares about itself, like all that sort of thing. Like, the character's only concern in the show is like just image, optics, and power. But if you have a look at any part of the left that even remotely considers themselves, Marxist, the Marxist left is entirely their philosophy. Like literally, it's literally their only concern is like optics and power at the literal expense of consistency and truth. But that's just a straw man projection, attacking the right wing. It's fucking crazy.
She's gone.
On top of that is weird love interest / psychological dependence. It's weird, I guess you'd say, because he had no mother when he was growing up. He has this weird sexual relationship with Firecracker in which he drinks breast milk, and that just implies that he's emotionally and mentally a baby. And if we apply the same principle as before, that he's representative of America and by extension of America, nationalist right wing of America, that implies the right are all babies, which is it's another psychological projection of the left, since they themselves want to live without moral consequences. They themselves want to abort babies due to their moral failure with promiscuity. They want to empower the government to look after them. They literally want to empower it into a welfare state to look after them indefinitely. That's just another moral projection. But it's insulting the right wing. It's trying to say the right wing through metaphor is that. It's okay. Aside from that, the main character of the story, the main hero, which I would point out they have denied rape justice to for over 5 seasons now, which is completely unacceptable. It's I'm not even gonna watch the show. What, so you're gonna depict a rape and then rape cuckoldry, and then you're going to deny justice for 5 seasons? Go fuck yourself. Outright. I'm not watching your shit show. The main character has worms? All the supposed heroes and superheroes in the series are already corrupt, narcissistic pieces of shit rather than good. It's a literal subversion of hero culture. Wow, so edgy. In what I assume is an attempt to end the moral hierarchy in superhero popular culture, and by extension, the moral hierarchy in comic book hero moral culture. I've just got to assume that's just an attempt to stagnate and subvert morality and structure, and popular culture. Like, that just straight up is, you know, queer theorist, there is no good, there is no evil, there is only power. Like, queer Marxist theorist, that, in which you're literally trying to subvert good. Like, okay, why would you want to do that to a culture if you weren't trying to, you know, corrupt and destroy it? Fucking... And it literally makes, like, moral paragons, like, a virtue, like Spider-Man. Like a weird, weak weirdo in a asylum that shits webs. Like, what the fuck is that? Okay, you're subverting superhero culture, beloved characters, heroes. You're doing it in the name of what I assume is, like, Marxist destruction of cultural identity. Like, you're a fucking piece of shit. You're an absolute piece of shit if you write that, if you put that out into the world. Yeah, it's like the same deal as, you know, 120 Days of Sodom. If you write a book that is like 90% horrible, blasphemous pedo shit, I don't have to respect your, you know, your outlook on the world. You're just like a fucking scumbag piece of shit. Like, what were they thinking? Like, the rape cuckoldry of the main character in Homeland is like intended nepotism, like, also seems to be like a deliberate insult of the right, implying that they're somehow the bad guys. Like, as does like Starlight's, you know, entry into the Seven, which, like, she basically gets, you know, sexual assaulted but agrees to it, like similar to like a Harvey Weinstein situation. Like, she has to agree to it in order to be inducted, otherwise she will never make it as like a hero. Like, these criticisms are like of hierarchical corruption metaphorically extending to like America, and by extension of America, like the nationalist right wing, like implying that they're all racists, rapists, and it's like fucking gross again. And like, this again is like another, you know, projection, especially if you like consider the amount of like corruption in like most of the vertical communist hierarchies, like the totalitarian ones. Like, the desperation just from, you know, food rarity alone leading to like vastly more sexual exploitations within gulags and without, just like interrogations and like food procurement during shortages, turning to prostitution for money, like that whole deal. Just like in like socialist and communist, you know, countries that have like fallen the fuck apart. Like, that's not to mention their own like hypocrisy when it like comes to like promiscuity and like the sexual sanctity of women. Like, women can like sleep with as many people as they want, fucking shouldn't be held to the consequences for having babies, even at the expense of the baby's life. Like, they're like fucking completely inconsistent, like morally, and like that is, you know, deliberately, like that's Marxist shit. They are not consistent, and they fucking lie. And like, in addition to that, it's also got this fucking absolutely horrible straw man it's sort of created. It's like attempting to push like the main character towards like a virus genocide of superheroes, and that like fits very uncomfortably onto like a class struggle, like with the underclass genociding like the upper class. It's like a projection of that, which is fucking horrible when you think about it. Like, the underclass would be the non-superheroes and the upper class would be like the superheroes, which is just like, which leftist piece of shit Marxists have done literally every time they've seized like totalitarian control. Like kulaks and Ukrainians in the Soviet Union, intellectuals in Cambodia under the Khmer Rouge, like landowners in China under the People's Party with like shaming ceremonies and beatings and all that sort of shit. And like the literal abolishment of, you know, property rights in North Korea with the government literally seizing everything. Like, it's fucked. It's fucked, and it projects onto this like resentful fucking Marxist narrative like fucking super well. It's just like a complete scumbag piece of shit thing. And like, it just reads as like an insult to like the right wing just through popular culture. Like, and it assumes that the right wing is like stupid, they're not going to be able to understand it. Like, they assume this in their narcissism, you know, despite pretty much every insult they put forward to the right wing, they are like projecting. Like, literally every insult and strawman in the show is like one of their, you know, either own personal failures or their ideological personal failures. It's just like Marxist and queer theorist in design, and it's like attempts to criticize and like destroy. And like, quite frankly, I'm fucking sick of like inconsistent piece of shit scumbag Marxists criticizing things without putting forward any better alternative, but still assuming that Marxism is a better alternative. Like, if you want to do a satire or whatever, go ahead, but, you know, an ideological strawman pushing Marxism forward as like some sort of, like, and by extension of Marxism, like communism and socialism, like pushing that forward as like a viable alternative to fucking anything, like any other system. Like, it's bullshit. It's fucked. Like, these people are pieces of shit. What do they fucking know? Like, they think they know everything because they're fucking, you know, narcissistic. You can catch them out in fucking fallacy after fallacy, though. Like, fallacies of composition, just because their lack of consistency, like, appeals to authority. You catch them in, like, every single fucking fallacy there is. And because their ideology means they, you know, powers all that is, they don't have to be inconsistent or honest, and it doesn't matter. Like, these people are fucking scumbags. Yeah, complete pieces of shit. But anyway, I'm not watching The Boys. My money's not going there. You shouldn't put your money there either. Quite frankly, I think you should, you know, rethink your, like, Amazon subscriptions and all that sort of thing. I don't know who directly funds it. I assume Amazon does, but maybe you should start rethinking that with, you know, that sort of quality that, you know, of shit they're putting forward. That sort of, you know, ideological. And apparently the first seasons were better. I don't know, I never watched the show. But I've heard, like, only recently they're going more and more fucked. But, like, even then, like, I don't fucking really care. Like, I spend my time on, you know, better art, better popular culture, better movies, better books, like that sort of thing. Like, I just spend my time watching better stuff. But, you know, might be time for a boycott on fucking these places, who knows? Because that seems like really fucking, you know, egregious. Really bad. And it's like, any money you give them is just going, you know, to fund more of this shit. More of this, you know, retarded, entitled, narcissistic, you know, dog shit, basically. Low quality Marxist critique of the West. When, you know, Marxism itself is inconsistent, sucks, and its political structures it's led to have all been dog shit and starved, you know, millions of people to death. Like, I think it's probably time, like, Marxism is like one of those ideologies that just appeals to narcissists and sociopaths and psychopaths that fucking just lie as easy as breathing. It might be time to just fucking, you know, say, alright, you can be a Marxist, but, you know, there's gonna be stigma around that. We're gonna assume you're a fucking scumbag if you're a Marxist. And, like, all of this, you know, if this weren't sort of centrally funded by an existing monopoly on art and monopoly on culture through, you know, influence in universities and just who funds all these movies and everything, the corporations already in place that are like pushing the ideologies and shit, I'd say, you know what, go for it, do your art, I don't really care. I'm not going to put my money to it, I'm not going to watch it or anything. But it would have to compete in the free market of ideas. Problem is, the free market of ideas has been fucking absolutely culturally infiltrated, basically, by Marxism and shit like that through universities. Like, people tend to develop like confirmation biases based on what they know. They're basically looking for things to support their opinion that they already hold, basically. If all you know throughout high school, public school, university is shit like climate change, communism's good, never been properly tried, you don't know anything about the communist atrocities because, you know, they hid them through media, they censored them, all that sort of thing. If all you know is, oh, right-wing ideologies tend to lead to Nazis, even though the Nazis were fucking authoritarian left-wing, they were controlling the market through a mandatory subscription to a union, the government's union, that is by definition owning and controlling the means of production. Not to mention that the party members, you know, owned a bunch of the industry as well. But the very fact that ideologically they controlled it through a mandatory subscription to a union, that's not a free market. That's not free market capitalist. That's not property rights. That's authoritarian left wing. That's not right wing. But like, if all you know is Nazis bad, Nazis right wing, rah rah rah, even though it makes literally no fucking sense when you think about it, when you think about the actual structure in place of it, like when you think about how it worked, and you just end up with this type of person who's like in Australia who like spits on people like Avi Yemeni because they assume he's right wing. They're just like tremendously cruel to people for like their own stupidity, basically. They don't understand. And it extends in art, and it extends from this like infiltration in universities that have, you know, just pumped into their head and given them this confirmation bias that the right wing is like bad and evil. Like, no, centrally controlled governments, and most of those tend to be, you know, left wing in design because they own and control, you know, the means of production. They don't give people property rights. Like, ideologically speaking, the right wing is, you know, free market property rights, yes? Like, makes no fucking sense. And because, you know, Marxism is like inconsistent, and is allowed to be inconsistent in its own ideology because all there is like optics and power. It only matters how you look, and even then you can exploit power, like censor people, shit like that. Like, that's exactly how it sort of turns out. It's fucking gross. And like, even now, even in popular culture with the boys, this shit's happening. Like, I'd say the fucking infiltration's probably got far enough, hasn't it? Like, no one wants to live in China. Like, only fucking weirdos want to live in China or like the Soviet Union or something. Like, actually go there and like, you know, deliberately be put under the thumb of like a communist party that literally will work you into the ground and starve you to death. Like, ideologically. And ideologically, they are of the mind that you deserve it. Because you're like an enemy of the state or whatever. Because, you know, you're criticizing them, you know, abusing you. Like, like, people who, like, think like that, they're fucking retards. Like, there's no other way to say it. You're a fucking dumbass if you think like that. The problem is, like, you can't even trust critics anymore because, you know, a lot of the critics would have gone through, you know, universities have a massive left-wing bias, especially in like journalism degrees, which would theoretically lead you to a career in, you know, as being a critic or whatever, because you theoretically go from, you know, journalism to being a critic, and you can't trust them anymore because they all have this fucking left-wing, you know, massive bias. They're not objectively looking at quality anymore. They're only looking for, you know, confirmation of bias that appeals to their left-wing ideology, basically. And you see this in Rotten Tomatoes. You see it in the disparity between the audience score And the critic scores. You see it in Metacritic as well, with the disparity between, you know, audience scores and critic scores. The critics are ideologically harsher on right-wing material and fucking extremely soft on left-wing material. Like, I don't know if any of you guys watched the bloody Hannah Gadsby thing from fucking ages ago. That was fucking trash. And like the critics fucking loved that and the audience fucking hated it. It was like a fucking 70-point swing in the reviews for that. And like people say, oh, it's just right wingers bombing the critics thing. Might have been the critics being fucking corrupt too, mightn't it? Like theoretically. And then like back in the day you also had like Cuties on Netflix, which was like, oh, that was fucked. That was like, you know, child beauty pageant, you know, pedophilia shit. And initially you had a ton of critics on places like Rotten Tomatoes, like, justifying it as like some sort of, you know, expose, highlighting the horrors of, you know, beauty pageants and shit. But, nah, not really. That's not really how that worked at the time. Like, it was kind of glorifying it a little bit. It's pretty fucking gross, really. Not far off fucking child porn. Which, like, fucking, around queer theorists, be careful. Like, you can't trust a queer theorist as far as you can throw them, apparently. Like, what was fucking Mr. Beast's bloody assistant now? Was, like, messaging a minor. Like, asking them to send nudes, or at least joking about them sending nudes and stuff. Okay, you can't trust any of these fucking Marxists or fucking queer theorists, like, as far as you can throw them. I think you should pretty much just assume that, like, they're into some bad shit. Like, that assumption would leave you significantly safer than, you know, assuming they have some sort of valid point or whatever. Like, there should be stigma around, like, queer theorists big time. Especially, like, when they're around kids. There should be, like, a ton of stigma. Like, okay, we can't assume you're not a pedophile if you're, like, a queer theorist around kids. And we can't assume you're not a lying scumbag piece of shit if you're a Marxist that will literally lie and, you know, use power to assert your ideology. Like, and Islam's a little bit different, but it's kind of the same in that respect. Like, if your ideal conduct of a man is, you know, Muhammad, who was like a sex slave, you know, pedophile, like, and like, you're gonna enforce that, you're gonna try and implement that in society to the point where you, because it's like a purity spell, you punish dissidents as well that don't go along with it. Like, you don't just, you know, enforce it, make sure, like, people, you know, are programmed into it, but you also punish dissidents as, like, either apostates or whatever. And, like, the left does the same thing. It's, with, you know, cancel culture, they literally try to get you fired. You're targeted for hacking and, you know, all this sort of shit. You're targeted for literal violence. It's the same sort of deal. It's absolutely fucking horrible. And it's just this confirmation bias, purity spiral shit. Just horrible. And obviously all of this is, you know, appeal to power. Once you use force in the realm of ideas, it's always an appeal to power, which is a logical fallacy. Like, even if they succeed, they implement their ideology, you know, worldwide, still doesn't make them correct. Yeah. Like, it doesn't make them logically correct. Even if they succeed, it doesn't make them correct. It just means they used an appeal to power. They used violence. And, like, people say, oh, yeah, but they won, right? Did they? Now they've got to live with their fucking decision. They're horrible, repressive societies that, you know, tolerate pedophilia and punish apostates and all that sort of thing. And you can't live in one of those societies forever without, you know, eventually bumping up to conflict. And once you bump up to the conflict, you realise you have absolutely no power against those in power. Like, that happened a ton. And the programming goes deeper than you think. Like, there are a ton of people in gulags that were still praising the party, just out of guilt. And yeah, it's just fucking sad. But once you bump up to it and you realise that you've given all your power away to these fucking piece of shit narcissist, psychopath, Marxists and everything, and you realise what you had in the West, which was like, you know, free speech, freedom of association, freedom of movement, free market of ideas, all that sort of thing. You literally had that in the West, and you threw it away over like fucking ideology. It's got to be fucking absolutely soul crushing to know that you're like pretty much, you know, solely responsible for all that. I can only imagine what it'd be like being responsible for your own fucking hell. Ugh. And quite frankly, they'd be narcissists too, so they'd be unable to accept fault when it come to them putting themselves in their own hell. So they'd never get out of it.